The next application is a text summarization app. Again, a pretty basic example, obviously, but still a great helper and actually a cool feature that you can easily build with the help of the API. Now, the code is basically code we know so far. We have some input here, some user input, where we can enter the text that should be summarized. We have our response, nothing new. The messages parameter only contains the user role with this input text that we provided. And the response, once again, is a separate variable that is printed afterwards. And here we have the summarized text added, so this will also be printed. And this code down here will simply add the response in a new line for better readability. So my goal is to summarize text, and I mentioned this here in my input. Now the problem is that this input is nothing ChatGPT actually understands. Because what we need to do here is we need to give ChatGPT a dedicated role that the user not necessarily should know about, and more importantly, that should not be provided by the user. Because as user here, I only want to provide my input. I don't want to specify that ChatGPT should summarize the content, because this is a summarization tool. So as a user, the only thing I want to do is I want to copy paste my text and get back the summary. Now the great thing is that in addition to our assistant and user roles, and I just saw that we are having both single and double quotes in here, both is valid in Python. You should just be consistent about what you're using. As I just want to add text here without having or adding any instructions, the great thing is that inside our messages parameter, we can also define an additional role, the so-called system role that allows us to give the API specific user input independent instructions. So these are instructions the user maybe should not see, but that the user also should not provide, but that we as developers want to give the API at hand, so to say. Ahead of our user role, so we first define the system role, then the user role, that is important, we define the so-called system here. And now the content for the system is the text or the instructions that we have for our specific application that we want to build. So here we first have to add the comma, and then we could say that the API is a text summarizer chatbot, and the goal is to summarize the text that is given to you by the user. So therefore, we first define the role of the system and then this user text that it should summarize. Now with this minor update of the messages parameter, and by now running this script, we can first add the text here. And now, without any further instructions, we should hopefully get a nice summary of this text. And as we see, the 6 lines here were summarized to 3 lines only, so this is pretty good actually. If I would remove this role, by the way, and execute my script once again with the same text input, then we should get a different result, because now the API doesn't have instructions about what to do with that text. So therefore, it comes up with the following output. It just rephrases the initial text, which obviously is not the goal that we had in mind. Now, according to the OpenAI team, this system role is not that important. Depending on the application you're building, you might omit this role therefore. But for cases like the one we have here, this system role is very important, as it defines the core task of the application that you're building. Because as mentioned, always forcing the user to add something like, please summarize this and that text is definitely not a good user experience. Therefore, I'll comment this code here back in. With this, we are almost done with the core API related topics in this module. I just want to show you one additional use case of the API, but instead of accessing the user input, I want to access data or text from files and create a new file with the summarized text.